Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock on a mission. Each one of us shares our own vision. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's I meet. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's I meet. While I pulled the dope, got to stay woke. I like to thank God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above.
Saludos. Once again, I'm your host, Gabe Morales. Before we begin, I would just like to reiterate, I've been dealing directly with heavy hitters in gangs hasta Joe Morgan, but I am not glorifying any of these gangs. I'm just trying to share some info on them for citizens and law enforcement. One of my viewers recently criticized me, saying that I made black gangs look like thugs, criminals, and no good. But let me try to clarify here. As I've stated many times before, black gangs mostly prey on other blacks and mostly hurt blacks from their area. Black and brown violence causes a lot of pain for black and brown families and communities and results in a schools to prison pipeline. I am trying to prevent our young people from going to prison and jail, prevent them from being addicted to drugs, prevent them from experiencing even more trauma than they already have. The gang lifestyle usually leads to years in jail and prison, the hospital, and an early grave, unless Black and Latino men change their ways. That is my mission, and I believe there is hope for change, and I thank God above for that. Let me start out today with San Fernando gangs and work my way down the valley into Northeast LA. I've already mentioned them in previous episodes, but 18th Street is active all over Greater LA, and they also have a presence in places like Reseda. Mara Salvatrucha is active in the Valley Glen area, and Clanton is also present in the San Fernando Valley with their Fourth Hood clique. Canoga Park, Alabama Street is one of the oldest barrios in the West Valley, dating from at least the 1950s, and some even say the 1930s. Allegedly, according to one of the vets I spoke to at Folsom Prison, they have one of the strictest initiation processes in the LA area. A CPA member allegedly has to go on probation for a couple of years, and a ruling vet committee is very picky about who is introduced to the clica. They have several cliques located throughout both Canoga Park and Winnetka districts. If you disagree with me on this or any other clicas I talk about, I invite you to come on my show and set the record straight. The Crazies clique in the Valley is a branch off of the original Crazies gang in Echo Park. Their main rivals are Reseda 13, and they also beef with 18th Street, Blythe Street, and Canoga Park, Alabama's. Besides leaving out the Crazies, one viewer commented that I forgot the Headhunters in my West Side video. They have several cliques, even if not as big or as well known as some other gangs, but they have been active in Rampart in the past, and a few moved to other areas like the Inland Empire. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, moving on. Bryant Street is located just northwest of Westside Crazies and Northridge, who occupy a row of apartment buildings between Tampa and Wilbur Avenues. They beef with Canoga Park, Reseda 13, and Asian Boys, amongst others. Barrio San Fer are active in the Silmar community of Los Angeles and the city of San Fernando. San Fer is one of the oldest gangs, and some of their members have spread to more affordable Antelope Valley and high desert areas. They are represented in the California Mexican Mafia via longtime member Michael Mosca Torres and Frank Sapo Fernandez. They can also be found sometimes in Washington State. Langan Street, aka Cepas, is a predominantly Hispanic gang located in the North Hills section of the West San Fernando Valley. Their cliques include Schoolyard Boys, Tiny Locals, Pee-wees, Primos, Diablos, Tokers, Night Stalkers, and Traviesos. They will often use the St. Louis Cardinals logo to rep their gang and put the thumb and index fingers up in an L fashion, which also resembles a gun. Columbus Street is located in the North Hills community in San Fernando Valley, and their barrio is adjacent to the Panorama City neighborhood. Cliques of this gang include pequeños, maniacs, gangsters, tiny locos, hoodsters, and Roscoe Boulevard gangsters. Their main rivals are Langdon and Blythe Street, which is why you see the L and B crossed out in the lower placazo. They have been the subject of a past gang injunction and can sometimes be found in Washington State. Blythe Street is another barrio located in the Panorama section of Los Angeles with a large veterano group, the majority of whom originally claimed the Diablos clique. During the late 1970s, according to some sources, Blythe Street was originally a clique of the Barrio Van Nuys, but it broke away to establish their own neighborhood. Their turf is basically situated from Parthenia in the north, Satakoy in the south, to Van Nuys Boulevard on the east, and Sepulveda Boulevard on the west. Like many other barrios in the valley, they started out as a protection group and became very active and violent in the early 1980s. They observed tagging crews to strengthen their numbers. Blythe Street was the first gang in the San Fernando Valley to be targeted for a gang injunction in 1993 by the city of Los Angeles. LAPD at that time documented about 350 members of the gang, and the gang injunction complaint named 96 specific members. Barrio Van Nuys is located all around the high school campus and on Delano Street in South Van Nuys. It dates to at least the 1940s. They will often use a New York Yankees logo to rep their barrio and are formally divided into North Side and South Side. They allegedly started out as the Pachuco Club and claim to have actually participated in the Zoot Suit riots. Barrio Van Nuys territory has been intruded upon by gangs like MS, Van Owen Street, Haskell's, and Valerio Street. They are broken up into different cliques like Counts, Peewees, and Cyclones, as seen on the placazo in the lower picture, as well as Delano Street. The San Fernando Valley has a very rich history. For those of you not from the area, it is located north of Los Angeles in the valley section before you come into the city and to Hollywood in Burbank. Back in the day, it was an agricultural area that quickly became a suburban area in the 1960s. Famous rock and roll star Ricardo Valenzuela, aka Richie Valens, was from Pacoima. The comedian Cheech Marin had a well-known character early in his career called Pedro de Pacas. Pacas is actually broken down into at least 20 different sub-barrios or cliques. Many of them have about 50 members each or more, such as Pacas 13, Pacas Flats, Project Boys, Criminals, Bonds, etc. Latin Times apparently only claims Pacoima because of the geography, and they do not get along with many other Pacas cliques. Raul Güero Smooth Garcia represents this area for La M and is presently housed at Kern Valley State Prison. I have interviewed a few Pacas members in Washington State, as well as several in Folsom Prison. Vinland Boys is a large Hispanic gang located in the Sun Valley and North Hollywood districts. Their main cliques are Pequeños, Dukes, Rascals, Jokerstown, and 129 Clump Street. They're known for beefing with 18th Street, Canton 14, and all Pacas gangs. Tunerville Ripa is an old Atwater Northeast LA gang. Timothy Timo McGee was an MA member from this barrio who was captured in Arizona and was involved in politics at the LA County Jail for many years. He was sent to death row for multiple homicides he committed and was allegedly involved in even more than that. But since all death sentences have been overturned by the governor of California, he is currently housed at the Salinas Valley State Prison. TVR has been the subject of a past gang injunction, as shown here on the map. Tunerville's relationship with Frogtown is hard to follow. Some say Tunerville started Frogtown, others say Frogtown started Tunerville. Others said they had nothing to do with each other. Some also say that Tunerville started the Rascals. Others say that Frogtown did. And then yet again, some say they all started originally from White Fence. The Rascals are frequently confused with TRG, the Tiny Rascals gang, a predominantly Southeast Asian gang. TRS is a Mexican gang in the Atwater Village area that claims turf located just east of the I-5, north of Elysian Park and Dodger Stadium. The Rascals mainly beef with Tunerville and Frogtown. Frogtown Ripa is a gang also located in Elysian Valley, northeast of Los Angeles. The community is named for frogs that used to be seen covering the streets back in the day but frogs have not been seen in the area for decades. They are just below the Rascals territory. MA and Frogtown member Arnie Gonzalez was able to influence Santos Slim Cepeda to infiltrate Homeboys Industries from 2013 to 2015. This plot was soon identified by Father Greg and his good people there in that program, and Cepeda and a few others were ejected from the program. Arnie arranged a truce with Frogtown, Tunerville, and the Rascals, and is presently housed at New Folsom Prison, where I had him back in 1989. Highland Park is located in an area west of Pasadena. It has a high Hispanic population, and as is the case of many barrios, a small percentage of those people in the area belong to HP 13. This is a gang who has origins going back several decades. Some say Highland Park was actually formed in 1972, but was originally known as the Baltimore Street Locals, named after the street where the gang would hang out between 53rd and Baltimore. They will use the cartoon character of Speedy Gonzalez as a logo for the gang, and would also use jalapeno to diss their biggest rival, the Avenues, after a gang war started with them in 1981. By the early 1980s, Highland Park began to expand its turf, bringing in new cliques and Strickland Boys, also called Peewee Locals, located on Strickland Avenue. They also formed another clique called the Dukes, who hung out on 50th Avenue, as well as Chicos Malos, located on Monterey Road. And in the early 1990s, they also took in several tagging crews into their clica. The Avenues of Northeast Los is an old LA barrio named after the numbered avenues off of Figueroa. They are broken down into several subclicas, such as 43rd Avenue and Cypress, and have been subject to scrutiny under CLEAR, Community Law Enforcement and Recovery. Alfred Tigre Salinas is from the Avenues, who feuded with Timo McGee from Tunerville Rifa at the LA County Jail. Tigre has been housed at Pelican Bay for many years and has been on disregard status. Mexican Mafia member Pee-wee Aguirre is another Avenues member with La M, who is covered in depth on the Mexican Mafia video part 2 that can be seen on this channel. Meanwhile, Javier Gangster Marquez was sponsored into La M, but was later put on freeze. Then he put in a lot of work to be cleared again. Besides 43rd, the Avenues also have 57th Clique, Pee-wee Gangsters, Assassin, and Cyclones. Cypress Park Boys are an old gang, as seen in the photos here. But to be honest, I couldn't find out much about these guys. Are they still around? Hit me up and let me know. It looks like they beefed at least at one time with Barrio Nuevo Estrada, Burbank 13 Ripa, and Lincoln Heights. And they appeared to have gotten along with Highland Park, and some of their members claim to have been transplanted up to the San Francisco Bay Area. Rivals will call them Cheese Puffs. Eastside Clover is a predominantly Hispanic gang located in Lincoln Heights community just east of LA and north of downtown. So they are included here with a few others that I forgot last time. The gang formed in the 600 block of Clover in the 1920s when Lincoln Heights was a destination for Italians, Irish, Russians, Mexicans, Germans, and Japanese. They are still active on 19th and 21st Street, as the picture above shows. Some of their cliques are Leprechauns, Jokers, Tiny Jokers, and Calle Sichel Locals. They have beefed with many different gangs, such as Eastside Barrio 18th Street, who took over an area located just west of Avenue 20. Clover has been represented by La M by longtime member Philip Blackie Segura. Lincoln Heights is a predominantly Mexican-American street gang located in a neighborhood known for its great views. Lincoln Heights formed sometime between 1910 and 1920, making it one of the oldest active gangs in LA. Cliques of Lincoln Heights include Parkside Locals, 28th Avenue, Thomas Street, Workman Street, and Sichel Street. Barrio East Lake Locals is another street gang located in the northeast section of Los Angeles. During the 1980s, as is the case with many other street gangs, they started off as a football team and party crew, but through conflict, they morphed into a street gang by the late 1980s. In the early days, they had an alliance with Eastside Clover, located just to the west of them. But by the early 1990s, that was gone, and they also have a rivalry with the nearby Lincoln Heights 13 gang. East Lake locals will often wear LA Lakers gear to rep their clica. Happy Valley Ripa is a very old gang who had a close alliance to Rolls Hill going back to the 1940s. Their barrio was over by Lincoln Park and by streets like Flora, Eva, Porcel, and Raleigh. Recently deceased Mexican Mafia serial killer Alfie Sosa was from Happy Valley. El Sereno Rifa is another Chicano gang located in the El Sereno part, northeast of Los Angeles. The main cliques of ESR have been the Ditch Locos, Guardia Street Locals, Ithaca Street Locals, and Lock Street, which is a main clica. Henry Indio Carlos is an Embe and El Sereno member who had a New Folsom Violence Control Unit who beefed with the Aryan Brotherhood. As I stated in the Aryan Brotherhood episode, usually the AB and the Embe get along, but there's always exceptions. El Sereno's enemies are gangs like the Avenues and 18th Street. For a time, in the early 90s, Lowell Street boys were a clique of El Sereno Rifa, but Lowell Street got blamed for a murder that occurred in 1992, so the rest of El Sereno distanced themselves from that neighborhood, and a green light was placed upon them. Then, a few years later, the conflict escalated between Lowell Street when Mexican Mafia member Antonio Tonito Rodriguez from El Sereno Rifa was shot and killed as he sat in his car on April 28, 1995, by a Lowell Street member, allegedly in a dispute over paying taxes. So they were put on the Verde Lista, or the green light list, which meant all Lowell Street gang members would be targeted by other Sereno gangs in LA, as well as in jail and in prison. Following the green light, several members of El Sereno conspired to kill Lowell Street boys. Preceding the death of Rodriguez, in December of 1992, 2 Lowell Street members were stabbed in the LA County Jail, but they survived. The first death of a Lowell Street member after the green light was placed was Jose Flaco Uribe, who was killed in the LA County Jail when he was beaten and stabbed 37 times until he died on February 6, 1993. One of the assailants, Joaquin Diablo Alvarado from El Sereno Rifa, was a personal friend of Uribe and knew he could get close to him without raising any suspicion. Alvarado was already in trouble before the hit because he was allegedly involved in a murder where he shot the wrong car and a stray bullet accidentally killed 13-year-old Mario Martinez in 1991. That is why he was in jail awaiting trial. Because he killed this young boy, Alvarado would have faced sanctions in jail unless he killed Uribe, which he carried out, even though he was his friend. After all this conflict in the early 90s, Lowell gang members began to embrace the idea that they're green lighted and use the term green light gang to describe themselves. And they would often wear Green Bay Packers gear. The Echo Park gang started in the 1960s and were active in the 1970s through 1990s. In 2013, the LA City Attorney's Office filed a gang injunction against Echo Park, even though the gang area was already heavily gentrified. Activists have called these gang injunctions legalized harassment to force people of color out of their homes. Law enforcement has made the argument that these laws were needed in order to get gang violence under control. As is often the case in many arguments, both sides can be right. In November of 2020, the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California and the Youth Justice Coalition reached a settlement with the city of Los Angeles, significantly impacting the ways in which police and prosecutors can use these gang injunctions. While a federal judge barred Los Angeles from enforcing most of the city's active gang injunctions in 2018, the settlement further protected potential defendants from being detained by the police simply because of the location they were living in, their clothing, and other alleged markers of gang affiliation, which many deemed to be stereotyping or even racism. The gang was made famous in the female gang movie-mentary Mi Vida Loca. The real sad girl, Angel Aviles, is good people and a good actress, a motivational speaker and author. So I mean no harm to her. But I'm gonna be honest here. When I tried to get an interview with Angel, her agent denied it, saying we weren't big enough for her client. Wow, too bad, too sad, because that would have been a real good one. Pero no te preocupes, senor agent. Gangsters, cop, and politicians is blowing up anyway. So maybe we'll get Danny Trejo or Salma Hayek instead. O chance que El Duran. ¿Me entiendes, Mentes? Órale, a rato. This is Gabe Morales, signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.
I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above.